Hello and welcome back to Property Matters on Dublin South FM. You can contact the show on Twitter, Facebook or LinkedIn at iPropertyRadio, or indeed email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your host for today is myself, Carol Tallon, and I'm delighted to be joined by Gerard O'Toole, Director of Valuation and Professional Services at Tuohy O'Toole. So Gerard, thank you so much for being with us today. I understand that the weather is a little milder in the west of Ireland today.
It's yes, lovely to be with you, Carol. Thanks for the invite. It is a little bit wild, but overnight was torrential. But right now it's fine, but maybe at 10 or 11 degrees.
Yeah, you know, one thing we're finding at the moment is that any little bit of sunshine is just really appreciated while the country remains in lockdown. And of course, like every other estate agency, Tuohy O'Toole is working under these restrictions at the moment. So, you know, perhaps we might just start by finding out, you know, how have the last 11, 12 months been on your team and the local marketplace there?
Okay, I suppose speaking personally, and I think probably speak for most estate agents, indeed anyone in business, the last year has been immensely challenging. The whole pandemic has changed our business utterly. And of course, we're living through something that none of us ever anticipated and hopefully we'll never see again. In terms of how we've operated, it has been largely remotely with some people in the office as well. Obviously, at the moment, it's largely remotely. The market overall in the last 12 months has been actually very robust, and much to our surprise. I think at this time last year, when the pandemic commenced, we would have largely written off the market for the year and thought this is going to be horrendous. But buyers actually seem to have a lot of time in their hands. They're at home, and they maybe reevaluated the wisdom of living in urban centres, be that Dublin, Belfast, London or elsewhere, and we've had inquiries globally. So people are motivated to move home, whether they've an emotional attachment to Ireland or to the west of Ireland or not. And we've seen really strong inquiries, and that resulted in quite a few sales last year. Obviously, at the moment, in level 5 lockdown, then inquiries have tailed off because supply simply isn't there. There's a lot of supply waiting to come into the market, but we're advising clients really to hold off until such time as we can actually undertake viewings.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that, Gerard. So let's start by focusing in on the supply. So, I mean, first of all, in terms of, let's take the new home supply. Has there been much essential construction works ongoing throughout the various restrictions, restricted periods, or have construction activities there kind of fallen into the non-essential and therefore shut down category?
For the most part, non-essential, that's sort of private speculative development. But obviously there are ongoing housing developments with the various housing bodies and Mayo County Council that have managed to stay open. But the bulk of the private residential work has ceased.
Okay, and in terms of secondhand, because this is something that we've kind of been touching base with estate agents up and down the country, and you know, this is a little bit of a mixed bag. Most places at this point are recording record low stocks, and we've seen figures from anywhere to kind of 30 to 45% reduction in secondhand stock levels. So, you know, your agency deals with quite a large catchment area, far beyond Westport. So in terms of supply, secondhand properties, over the past 12 months, you know, what's the reaction to sellers when it comes to preparing their properties for the market? Are they confident about bringing their properties forward at this time?
At this time, the last couple of months, we've advised clients really since the end of Q4. In fact, probably a little bit sooner in terms of selling property, because obviously there's a huge seasonality to it. So we haven't seen new stock come onto the market until probably since the autumn selling season, because you're in that gradual slowdown coming into Christmas. We've seen over the course of the last 2 months, clients, many of them motivated to sell and keen to sell. I think they recognise that there's plenty of demand. Indeed, I would say there's pent-up demand, and prices held firm. Indeed, I would say in some of the locations, the better properties actually went up in value last year. So I think vendors that are motivated to sell recognise there's a market there, but they're listening to advice and not putting their properties on the market, because you're just not going to get that momentum. You're going to place it on the market, plenty of inquiries, but unfortunately we can't do viewings, and only for the most motivated buyers. And I did have one actually last week sold to somebody from New Zealand who's not seen the house and is willing to sign a contract. But the vast majority of people, without seeing it, they're not going to buy. So there's a degree of inactivity and I guess on our part, frustration.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, we spoke to IPAV Chief Pat David earlier this season about these restrictions, and they really seem to shut the market down without actually calling it a shutdown. But it is interesting to see the infrequent transactions that are going through. So, for example, you mentioned there that you had a buyer in New Zealand. So was that somebody who would have been familiar with the area, if not the actual property?
Precisely. But at the same time, or making a decision, a big financial commitment to the house that they have not seen and they've not had anybody look at. They're familiar with the location. They would have a big sort of emotional attachment to it and may well have had somebody sort of view it from the outside. But the other side of the world and a different time zone, and they're willing and able to commit to a purchase. So, but that's a one-off. This is this is not a frequent occurrence.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, though. Actually, we were speaking to agents down in the southeast, and they reported very much the same. Because of the lack of stock, it means that people who know the area and have a good idea of value, that they're actually taking a chance on properties like this. I suppose one of the interesting things that we don't know yet will be what the level of fall through rate. Because people, particularly, it's different that in that particular example, the buyer was in New Zealand, but for somebody who lives even 10 kilometers away, they need to sale agree the property before they can gain access to the inside. So we don't know yet how many of those are likely to fall through. So this could be a very costly but not very effective exercise in keeping the market open. And again, it's too early to say, but I think it is interesting to see that the behavior for consumers has really moved on digitally. And, I would like to think that we're not going to go backwards on that. We're never going to go backwards. So we mightn't want people to rely on technology to sale agree a property that they haven't walked into, unless, of course, they are outside the country or there are exceptional circumstances. But technology has definitely changed the operations for estate agencies.
Totally agree. That's a given. It's been evident over the last 2 to 3 years, and even the traditional high street estate agents worked in a very traditional way and largely bought and sold properties for clients in much the same way as they had done for years. That's changing, and I think we really have to embrace it. All of us consume data now on digital platforms, be it meetings like this or communicating with clients and whatever, or shopping in basic essentials. So property buying is likely to go that way.
Tuohy O'Toole are well-established, long-established leaders in and around County Mayo. Where was your tech adoption prior to 2020?
Well, I had never done a Zoom call. I'd never done a Teams call. And I said, like everybody else, it was thrust upon us. We've had a digital platform in having a website, and that is essentially our shop window to the low. We're actually rebuilding that because I'm conscious, having built it about initially 10 years ago and then revised it 5 years later. It's not that tech friendly, i.e. the vast majority of people consuming data on a mobile phone, and it's not compatible with that. So we're working through that, and then on the back of that, implementing a big social media platform. So listen, this is all something we're struggling with and grappling with and getting used to. But as I said to my colleagues last week, it's something we have to embrace. The technology is changing. The market is moving so quickly. You really have to embrace it and get on with it.
Yeah, no, look, you're absolutely right. And in that respect, we're not going to go backwards in terms of technology. So we'll only be building on the momentum that's been gained over this time. One of the other things that you touched on just a few moments ago, which I'm really interested in, we're hearing anecdotally about this mass exodus from the main urban areas and the main cities, even regional cities, to more rural locations. What's your experience over the last number of months in terms of inquiries, transactions going through, and maybe people who just want to rent to get a feel for the local area?
Yeah, I think that was something that was very evident, possibly not as much in the last couple of months because we were in level 5 lockdown, but for most of last year, from really the beginning of the pandemic, from about the beginning of Q2, right throughout the year, level of inquiries from people. And, you know, as you said, technology has changed their lives, the ability to work remotely and to do it successfully, and for employers to embrace that, for saying, you know, this works. And whether it's a hybrid model, you know, where you're commuting 2 days a week, or you're working full time in a rural location or a small town. So our experience is that there were strong inquiries, and particularly from large urban centres, and particularly Dublin. Now, Westport, West Mayo, West of Ireland, it's an easy sell. It's got a really compelling lifestyle appeal. But I've no doubt there are colleagues from up and down the length and breadth of the country that are seeing people that are motivated to move out of large centres. And I guess there's a combination of factors, you know, but ultimately it's about a better quality of life.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. I think, you know, the west of Ireland in general, Mayo in general, but I think Westport has a special place for people. So you're right. You know, there is a very compelling quality of life argument that would draw people over. So actually, are you seeing most of the inquiries, are they coming from people who have a connection or originally from the area? Or are you seeing many newcomers who have never lived in Mayo and have no connection to the area?
Yeah, but that's always been the case. Westport is, you know, this is not the typical small West of Ireland town. It's very cosmopolitan, it's very open, maybe quite liberal, and maybe quite different from a lot of other locations. So, you know, right through from the 50s and 60s, that's when the first people started to relocate and come here. Many of them have stayed, and, you know, they now call it home. So, you know, if you looked at the demographic in terms of our typical buyers, it'd be very distinctly different from lots of other locations across the country, or indeed Mayo. So lifestyle buyers, people retiring or buying a property, the view to retiring in a couple of years, make up a fair proportion of the overall sales. But certainly what was evident this year is probably people of a working age with families, that many of them had emotional attachment to Westport or elsewhere in Mayo, but didn't necessarily want to move to their hometown, but were happy to come to Westport for maybe the better quality of life, or amenities or facilities, being on the water or whatever else.
Yeah, and look, that makes absolute sense. And I mean, a lot of this is enabled by working from home, but I think, you know, maybe the remote work and working from home have become interchangeable when maybe they shouldn't be, you know, because there will be some people that, you know, maybe busy lives at home means that working from home isn't ideal, but also they don't want to be working, you know, in an office in Galway City or Limerick City or Dublin or Cork. You know, has Mayo got a hub that would accommodate remote working for people like that?
Yeah, there's a number of them, in fact, and the Western Development Commission are developing hubs right across the Western Seaboard, from Donegal right down to Kerry. So the idea is that they have about 100 connected and fully interconnected hubs that would give an opportunity for people to have a single desk, rather like a serviced office, or, you know, a fully fledged business that could come in. So we've got a number of them. We've got one in Westport, which was developed about 4 years ago, but it's oversubscribed. They could fill it twice over, and that was indeed pre-COVID. So the underlying demand there was really, really strong. There's a big one attached to GMIT in Castlebar, but the local authority in Enterprise Ireland are seeking funding to develop another large one at the old Imperial Hotel. So this is a brilliant initiative. I happened to talk to the Western Development Commission just 2 weeks ago about a client's property. The vast majority of them are publicly owned and funded. I think of the 50 or 60 they have up to date open, there's only about 4 of them that are in private ownership. But it's a fantastic initiative. And this is exactly the kind of enabling infrastructure that will facilitate further movement of people, which, you know, feeds into the broader ability and hope that we have more diverse sort of regional development.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Western Development Commission are doing an outstanding job on that. But like you say, their job is made slightly easier, that there is a compelling case for quality of life in the west of Ireland. And I think these hubs will really just be further enablers, if not drivers of this. So again, interesting time for the west of Ireland, and indeed for all of rural Ireland. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. That was Gerard O'Toole, Director of Valuation and Professional Services at Tuohy O'Toole. We need to take a quick break now. Stay tuned.